How often are you physically intimate with your partner, and is it satisfactory for you? 2. 3x per week assuming everyone in the house is healthy. Sometimes more. And of course sometimes less. Married 18 years. Early 40s. 3 kids. It hasn't always been like this, and we had to start being intentional. 2 years ago we implemented date nights, where it was kind of understood that it would end in sex. These aren't dates. Paresi, but night where we make sure we are done with all of our stuff, so we can devote a few hours to non-sexual and sexual intimacy. It's worked really well for us, and has definitely ignited my wife's libido. I'm a woman, but the higher libido partner, and this is what we did too, which was extremely successful after almost a decade of a libido mismatch. We implemented Sexy Saturday, and haven't looked back in more than 3 years. I prefer sex at bare minimum 2 to 3 times per week, so having a once a week sex date night is definitely a compromise, but it keeps us in the rhythm of having sex. We now have some spontaneous sex about every other week in addition to our planned date day. Prior to implementing Sexy Saturdays, we actually had sex about once every 6 months, and I was rejected a lot, so I had given up even trying to initiate more than once a month or so. For Sexy Saturday, we alternate who initiates each week. It's a hard sell to plan sex, I find, but it's actually really fun because I can be creative without worrying about rejection, and he has the notice to get into his most comfortable self, grooming etc. for being open to having sex. Life is funny. I'm sitting here single, sad about not having sex, but then I can read stories like this, where a couple has to schedule sex to make sure it happens. Thanks for writing this out. It's a reality check for me. Yeah, there's pros and cons to both, haha. Hardly ever these days. It's kinda shit. Maybe this is pure ignorance or something, but I, 30F, simply do not understand how people stay in relationships when there is little or no sex. Like, my brain cannot compute how many people experience or face this in their relationship and just like accept it to a degree. There is zero chance I could do it. Money. Most of my partners have been once or twice a month ladies. I feel like once to 3 times a week would be ideal. At twice a month I'm pretty happy. Once a month is feeling pretty minimal and not the best. Less than once a month is re-available at the relationship territory, though not necessarily jumping to breaking up depending on circumstances and if adjustments can be made over time. That said, while we weren't having sex super often, we still had a lot of touch going on. Hugs, kisses, cuddling, hand holding, head pats and head scratches, back rubs, etc. And that kind of touch was on a daily basis and very frequent. Without that level of touch, the lack of sex would have been a lot less satisfactory to me. I do need a lot of touch in relationships. It just doesn't always need to be sex, though I would like it to be sex more often than it typically is with the partners I've had. That said, I know plenty of women who are higher libido and prefer sex far more often than the people I've dated. And I think they are more common than they are made out to be. So if you need a partner with a higher sex drive, she's probably out there somewhere. But finding someone who checks all the boxes perfectly is hard. So I would carefully consider where you're at now before jumping to any decisions. Are you truly unhappy? Or are you just thinking the grass is greener on the other side? Are there things you can do that will enrich your sex life, even if you aren't having sex as frequently as you like? Naked and touching each other, masturbating together, either helping each other out or not, or other things that could be sex adjacent that might even get her in the mood more often, while also helping provide some relief for your needs, while putting less pressure on her to have sex when she doesn't want to as often. And is she willing to do that? And would that be helpful to you? All of that said, if you're truly unhappy, there's nothing wrong with ending a relationship over sexual incompatibility. If you're committing to having sex with one person for the rest of your life, or even for a long time period, you want them to be a good match for you. I'm only asking you to consider if other options may help, since you sound like you're otherwise happy with the relationship. So it sounds like putting in some effort to make things better might be worth it before just jumping ship. But ultimately, you have to decide what will or won't make you happy. Once or twice a week usually. I could have more easily, but this is enough. That I don't feel neglected and she isn't bothered by me taking care of myself in between. Sex is good too. 60 years old. Married 30. Once a week. Good to know there are people your age still getting some. I would guess my dad gets it less than once a year. My brother had a dead bedroom for over a year and they were only at 40. Hopefully it's better now. But I don't see him much these days. That'd be awful. I wouldn't stay in a relationship if I had a dead bedroom by then. LMAO. I think once a week is the lowest I'm willing to go, barring extreme health related circumstances. Before I'd break up over it. 2 to 3x per week. Married 43 years. Nice one. Once every 3 months if I'm lucky. We sinking in the same ship. Chief. I'm so sorry to say this, but I can't help it. Username checks out. Quite comedic. Acceptable. Woman here. My drive is way higher than my husband's. We've been married 11 years. During years that I was pregnant, breastfeeding and all that, my drive was lower. We had sex once a week or so. Sometimes twice if we had a good amount of time on a weekend. Once those years were over my drive came roaring back and I want it every other day minimum. He's fine with once a week or less. We have sex every 3 days or so. I love him enough to tone my ass down, and he loves me enough to put effort into being available for me. Mismatched libidos aren't a big deal if there's love, communication and mutual sacrifice. I love him enough to tone my ass down, and he loves me enough to put effort into being available for me. Mismatched libidos aren't a big deal if there's love, communication and mutual sacrifice. Yeah, that's the real deal breaker scenario, not the mismatched libidos. If the lower libido person isn't willing to do it more often and just wants the high libido to deal with it, that's what turns it into legitimate deal breaker, or can push some people to end up tempted to cheat, not necessarily acting on it. I just mean the thoughts occur when they feel neglected and uncared for. It sucks how stigmatized the sexual incompatibility is too. The one who breaks up when their partner isn't willing to compromise to do it more often is always viewed as the shallow asshole that didn't really care enough. Whenever I can get it. Average once a week. Sometimes less. Sometimes more. Sometimes much less. Depends on my partner's shift pattern. Nursing. Similar frequency here. Once a week usually. Sometimes twice. Expecting it to pick up in a couple years when kids are older. Because we were 2 to 3 times a week up until recently. 64 meters and 58th, married 22 years. Once a week on average. There are gaps back quote cause life it's been better the last few years than the 10 prior years. Better communication and gummies. This will cheer you up. My best and most frequent sex was when I was 69 years old. Go figure. I've been with my fiance for just under 10 years. We are averaging about 2 to 3 times a week, with one of those days usually a weekend being a multi-encounter day. Our encounters get better every year. We've run into problem times of me feeling like there's no point in asking if she's just going to reject me, and times of her being the same way. In our case, it's always been some other stressor causing this behavior. The best pieces of advice I can give you: talk to her. Honestly open up and be ready for criticism. For my fiance, she felt like we set the bar too high, that we both had to have mind-blowing sex every time, so it made her start turning me down, to not have to deal with that pressure/bar every time. For us, a solution was to find a way to signal to each other it's approaching sexy time as opposed to it's sexy time now. This lowered the immediately felt pressure and resulted in a lot more successful approaches. For us, neck touches are a sign of I think we should go to the bedroom soon. After setting up the signal, still surprise her with it's sexy time now, knowing you could be rejected. Gotta be able to reject, but also never stop trying. It's a weird thing to figure out the balance to never stop dating. Like we came really close to breaking up, and I threw a Hail Mary of let's just date more and see what happens, and somehow a lot of the other pettiness and doom thinking has shrunk away. So true. That was what made me reject a partner more than I wanted to. He wanted to do it for hours and have me squirting all over to place every single time, and was also okay with me working 3 jobs 80 hours. Sorry, but that does not leave the time and energy for 4th job as porn star. OMG. I wonder how many couples this is a problem for. For real, we ended up having sex way less than I wanted, cause we couldn't ever have sex any more chillax than he wanted. Read posts in r/dead bedrooms and you will quickly change your mind about the silliness of ending a relationship over mismatched libidos. Did you forget n/s? That sub seemed like the epitome of breaking up with someone because of sexual incompatibility. I think he was right. The op thinks it's silly to end a relationship over this, but that sub will change his mind. My bad. I'm just like a bike. Too tired. Lol. I gotta remember that. 1 or 2 a month. But my wife is asexual and is not very interested in it herself. Would I like it more? Definitely. But I like my life with her even more than I miss the sex. Maybe I could have another relationship with more sex. But I doubt I would have such a great partner in all other aspects in live. Sex is important, but not the only thing. I'm 29 and together for 14 years now, married for 8. Sex obviously isn't that important to you, which is completely fine. That's why you're happy in your relationship. But for a lot of other men this would be far from ideal lol. 39 and 4x a week. Been together 4 years and married 1. 5. Before you go down the road of focusing on her, are you in shape? Have some ambition? Social life? etc. I'd say I'm in pretty good shape. I eat overall healthy, exercise every day, I limit my alcohol consumption, and I have a great social life. I have a good idea of how I want to spend my life over the next few years, and it seems to fit into how she sees her life unfolding. I'm attentive to her needs and check in on her emotional state relatively often. There doesn't seem to be any importance attributed to if my needs are met or not. In that case I would ask about your game. Do you engage? Is playful dirty talk? Compliment her beauty? Touch her sexually? And most important, do you do these things even without expectation of sex? A little sexual tension can go a long way. I would say yes, I do all of those things. A follow-up question. Does she orgasm every time you have sex? And I mean a real one. Not a fake one to get you to come faster. The reason I'm asking this is that if her needs aren't being met, then there's nothing in it for her, and that quickly leads to viewing sex as a chore. I ended my marriage over this. The level of resentment gradually builds over time, and it's emasculating. If you're questioning it now, it's going to get way worse. There are women in the world who have a compatible sex drive with you. If you're willing to walk away, I'd recommend having an honest chat about it with her, like this is a deal breaker for you. As a man, we have some small part in getting your gal riled up to play. It could be valuable to get involved with men's groups that focus on this. Good luck. This resentment builds and it tears you up inside. Are you guys having sex? Dead bedroom for a year now. IKR. I'm so jealous. 2 to 3 times a week. There are times where it's fireworks and times where it's meh, but the passion is always there between us. 60F. 2 to 3 times per week. Married 36 years. You guys are my heroes. It's best not to compare yourself with other couples. We are all different. For some, once a day isn't enough. For others, once a week is too much. The real question is, are you getting your needs met? Monogamous relationships are an interesting thing when 2 people decide we are going to get this one thing, sexual intimacy, from only each other and neither of us dare think of getting it elsewhere, and one partner has little to no interest, but also don't you dare go elsewhere. A conversation really needs to be had about what this commitment really means, because it should mean everyone is satisfied. Eater, within reason. Remember, you're supposed to love each other. Lack of sex led to resentment and the vicious cycle grew until we separated. Sex won't make a relationship, but it'll sure kill one. Once a week of enthusiastic sex at the minimum would be wonderful though. Sex won't make a relationship, but it'll sure kill one. Bingo. Not a man, sorry, but wanted to give some perspective from a woman's side. My ex-husband and I had a very boring sex life. I didn't really realize it until after we split and I started seeing other people, but ultimately my needs were not being met in that relationship, which made me not want to have sex with him. It wasn't anything out of petty. I just wasn't attracted to him like that and didn't feel turned on by him anymore. He didn't help with the housework, with the kids. He didn't put any effort into dating me or being my friend or offering any kind of emotional support. Neither one of us ever thought to sit down and discuss these things, so our marriage inevitably fell apart. My current husband is the complete opposite, and he turns me down more than I turn him down. We typically have sex every 1 to 2 days. Good job figuring it out and applying it to your current relationship. If either of your goals was to have a long-term relationship, just know it's far more likely to get worse than better as time rolls on. That's my fear. You should still be in the honeymoon phase. Imo, you likely aren't sexually compatible. If you're a year in and fighting to get once a week, I would recommend having a very serious conversation with yourself. Very likely it will not improve and will actually worsen. Maybe I'm just a guy, but I could have sex, even if I wasn't in the mood. If she wants it, I'll do it. Probably last longer too. I get that women need some warming up, so maybe they can't just do it whenever he wants it. Maybe you could try being more flirtatious or say suggestive things throughout the day, rather than hey, it's 9 o'clock, time for sex. There's a lot of building up to the rejection. Lots of cuddling and hand holding throughout the day until finally we're in bed naked and all she wants is to cuddle. No more, no less. Either she figures out how her sex drive works, or you end it. Like others have said, check out the Dead Bedroom sub. Guys over there are shells of their former selves. How often are you having sex? Sex less than 6 to 12 times a year is considered a sexless relationship. Me and my right hand enjoy each other's company about twice or thrice a week. I can get it on command at any time. We've been together 5 years and she's never turned me down. Problem is I'm not as sexually excited by her as I'd like to be. I had a very colorful sex life before I met her, which I really miss, but I have a hard time giving up a wonderful woman because of my own unquenchable desires. That said, she is abundantly satisfied by our sex life, partly because that's where I take out my frustrations, and her satisfaction means that she takes good care of me in all the other aspects of our relationship. We are also both incredibly sweet and affectionate with each other, so that helps a lot too. I'm trying to take a more spiritual approach to my sexuality, but that doesn't alleviate me drooling over every other hot person I see. Once or twice a month throughout most of my marriage. I thought I could be okay with that for a while despite the fact I wanted sex once or twice a week. Eventually I began to resent that it was so unimportant to her. We lasted almost 20 years, but the divorce will be final in a few days. As much as I wish she would have agreed it was an issue and decided to work on it, I also wish I hadn't wasted so much time hoping things would eventually get better. That's the thing, I guess. To them it's not an issue. Yeah, it's important to see issues in a relationship as something you're both dealing with instead of seeing it as something the other is dealing with. The main reason for this is that both people should simply just care about each other. The other reason is because realistically if it's affecting one of you, then you're both going to be eventually affected, so it becomes both your issues regardless. 37 meters with 30F. We average more than once a day, but we both have insanely high libidos and a free use dynamic. My needs are excessively well taken care of. Happy for you, brother. That sounds great.